Welcome to the Develop Yourself podcast, where we teach you everything you need to land your first job as a software developer by learning to develop yourself, your skills, your network, and more. I'm Brian, your host. Hey, before we get into this episode and learn some SQL together in a really hands-on way, which I hope you're excited about, I want you to know that there's only a couple weeks left to register for Dev 30. Dev 30 is a 30-day program where we teach people JavaScript in a group setting, learning in public, getting a social media presence, and live sessions with our director of engineering. It's a hell of a deal, and it also gets you a massive discount to Parsity. Go to dev30.xyz. That's dev30.xyz. I hope to see you there so you can join us and take advantage of all the cool stuff we got going on for Parsity in the new year. And lastly, check out our new website, which I just launched last week, parsity.io. Curious what you think about it. Anyway, back to the episode. You know what's kind of weird? At some point, all coding bootcamps decided we're going to teach the MERN stack. MERN stands for Mongo, Express, React, Node. There's nothing wrong with this stack. In fact, it's very, very common, which is the reason why we teach it at Parsity, including some other technologies that we've since added in order to make people even more hireable and just kind of keep up with market trends, including things like AWS, TypeScript, soon to be Python, data engineering, foundational things that make you a good programmer and just not a good coder or a person that knows how to write React. We really want to produce good programmers that know foundational knowledge that can really work across different stacks. But what I've been thinking of lately, and a big change I'm making at Parsity, is to add SQL. I guess it's not really a big change as much as it's just a change. And there's a few reasons behind that move. One is that it's never been easier to learn SQL and set up SQL. And I suspect that the reason a lot of boot camps, including Parsity, didn't add it in the past is because it was a pain to set up, especially if you had people using Macs or Windows, and if you're doing a remote program, it was just a chore. It was a pain. MongoDB, on the other hand, was actually really easy to set up in the past. They had a cloud instance, and it was just super simple to set up. The problem, though, is that MongoDB, even though it's taught and easy to set up, is not simple to use. It's not really as intuitive as SQL. SQL takes the form of essentially Excel tables. If you've worked with Excel tables, you kind of have an idea for how SQL works, or the kind of data and the way you store it, because that's how most data is stored. It's stored in Excel sheets, CSV files, Google Sheets, things like that all businesses use. Is it archaic? Maybe. Is it efficient? Absolutely. Is it high paying? Even more so. So MongoDB is the second most popular database choice, and SQL is the first. So why not just learn SQL? Because professionals like the CERN stack, SQL, Express, React, Node. So why not just learn it? And it's not that hard, honestly. What I want to do in this episode is basically walk you through how you can set up a SQL database in the cloud and use ChatGPT to basically help you create a scenario where you have some data across multiple tables that you can now start querying. And you could do this on a site like SQLzoo.net. That's SQLzoo.net. I think that's a fantastic site. I also think there's some good offerings on Codecademy and probably a whole lot of other places that I just don't know off the top of my head right now. But I think the main issue with sites like this or Codecademy or Scrimba or whatever is that they give you the tools and the training wheels to learn. So they basically give you here's a query and fill in the blanks. And that teaches you some nice basics, but it certainly will not get you to the point where you can just go on your own. I think as soon as possible, the goal is to get off of these training wheel type programs and get into working in quote unquote real life scenarios, because that is what you're ultimately paid for. That is going to reflect the reality of the kind of work you do. There's nothing wrong at all with SQLzoo or Scrimba or Codecademy. I use all these things. I love them all. I think they're awesome tools. I also know that that's not the goal. The goal is not to get really good on those platforms. The goal is to get enough knowledge on those platforms that I can just go off and do my own thing with a real world scenario. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So step one is to set up NeonDB. And you're going to do that by going to neon.tech. You're going to create an account. It's going to ask you to make a project and then a database. Name it whatever the heck you want, right? So after you do that, I want you to go into the SQL editor, and that'll be on the left-hand side of the screen. It'll basically open up this code editor looking thing where it has some SQL. SQL or SQL stands for Structured Query Language. It's basically a way to get data out of tables. So if you think of like an Excel sheet, you have columns, right? So you may have a bunch of columns. Like think about if you had a school and the school had students. And on the left-hand side, in one column might be the IDs. On another column might be the student first name. Another column might be the student last name. Another column might be the grade that they're in, and so on and so forth. And you may, at the job you're at the school district, you may want to know how many students are in grade 9. So what you would do is something like select star from some table where grade equals 9. Already this sounds kind of intuitive, right? I challenge you to look up how to do that same exact query with something like MongoDB. It is not intuitive. So even though MongoDB is quote unquote easy to set up, and we teach it at Parsity and most other boot camps do too, it doesn't have the same intuitive language that something like SQL does. By the way, SQL or SQL, same thing. Structured query language. If you ask certain people how to say SQL, they'll say SQL. Certain people say SQL. If someone says squeal, that's weird. You should just stop listening to them immediately. They don't know what the hell they're talking about, or maybe they've been working in some place in a dungeon somewhere that I don't know about. But yeah, SQL, SQL, same thing. So now that we've set up our database, we want to create some basic tables. These tables are going to be the like fake data we're going to use in order to learn how to query it. And we're going to not just do like one table with like some really simple stuff. We're going to do some kind of advanced stuff here. But the nice thing is, ChatGPT can set all this up for us. These prompts, by the way, are in the show notes, these step-by-step instructions on how to do this on your own. And you can just do this. But if you want to follow along, here's what you should be doing. So you want to tell ChatGPT, I want you to provide SQL commands to create a basic set of tables for users, orders, and products. Include appropriate relationships and primary keys. It's going to dump you out some SQL, some SQL, and it should say something like create table users, create table products, and create table orders. Cool. What you're going to do is copy and paste that directly into the SQL editor in NeonDB and let it do its thing. You're going to run that and it should tell you, cool, you're done. Now, time to actually add data into the database, because what good are these tables? These tables are kind of like Excel sheets and they have the columns and stuff, but they don't have any actual data. So we need to provide it some data. Now, before ChatGPT, you could go in there and, literally hand code or just add a bunch of stuff into the tables. That's not so fun. Why not use ChatGPT to do that for us? So you go back to ChatGPT. You say, give me some SQL commands to insert sample data into the users, products, and order tables. Please provide at least 100 instances of each. It will give you some more SQL. You will copy and paste that and replace whatever was currently in your SQL editor with the new SQL and then run that. Now, querying the data. Now you want to do something like really basic, like how do you select all users and their emails? And I want you to try to figure out how do you select all users and their emails from the users table. Now you have 3 tables at least, right? Maybe you've done something differently, but you should have at least 1, 2, or 3 tables. You should have the users, you should have the products, and you should have the orders. So if you wanted to select usernames, like if you wanted to get a list of all the usernames and all their emails from that users table, here's how you'd write it. Select username, comma, email from users. Now you may have to add quotes, and that may cause you some errors. This is really how you learn. You're going to have a few errors here and there. You're going to have to do some Googling, some searching, maybe even asking ChatGPT, hey, this isn't working. Read the error messages. See, why isn't this working? Next, I want you to ask ChatGPT, give me an example of a left join that shows all users and their orders, even if they haven't placed an order yet. I also want you to ask it, why are right joins barely used in SQL? And explain how left joins are preferred instead. This will lead you to some interesting topics about, what is a left join? What does that mean? Think about the relationships between the users and the orders. An order will probably have a user attached to it. If you order something on Amazon, that order will track to you somehow. It'll say, Brian ordered a big bag of rice or a big giant bag of potatoes. He's a weirdo. He likes rice and potatoes and orders keyboards or whatever. And that order is going to have my user ID. And that user ID is going to tie to me and my credit card info and all sorts of other stuff. Now, putting all this in the same table would get really messy really quick, right? Could you imagine if your username and then you had like your order, the ID, the thing that was in the order, the product information, the table would be enormous. So the whole point of using something like SQL is that you can have multiple tables and you can have these relationships between them. So a user might have an order, or rather an order might have a user attached to it. The order would have products and it might have the ID of the product. So you can say, oh, this order has this product ID, and this product ID. And then you could look in the product table and say, oh, look at the ID for this product and it relates to this and this and this and this. And each order will have one user attached to it as well. So if you wanted to get information about the user and their order, you'd have to join those tables somehow. And the way to do that with SQL is using a left join. Now, to be completely honest with you, I couldn't tell you why we don't use right joins off the top of my head. Ask ChatGPT, but it is one of those funny things which I just took completely for granted. When I was writing up the notes for this episode, I was realizing, oh yeah, no one uses right join. Why not? Now on to the next challenge, which is writing queries. I want you to find an order by a specific user. I want you to ask ChatGPT, how do I find all orders placed by the user Alice, for example? And it should tell you how to do that. Now, the important part of this is not to get this response back from the SQL editor and feel really good about yourself, like, oh yeah, it's working. You should start thinking, what are some things I could be doing? What are some things I don't know how to do? For example, how could you write a query that counts how many orders every single user has placed? What about finding all the products that have never been ordered? What about a query that calculates the total revenue from all the orders? This could be some really interesting challenges to lead you down some interesting rabbit holes and actually learn for real how to write some SQL queries. Now, we've just barely scratched the surface today, but if you want to go further, you could use a tool like sqlzoo.net. You could ask ChatGPT to do a recap of select, join, aggregation queries and ask it for more advanced SQL topics. And this could lead you into more challenges. And you can even ask it, like, give me some more challenges that would teach me the following things: select, join, aggregation queries, and common table expressions. By the way, ChatGPT is not a substitute for going to a program like Parsity or Scrimba or any of these great tools out there. The reason that I can give you this list of ChatGPT prompts is because I used to write SQL for a living and I'm currently writing it at my job. So I know the questions to ask it that can lead it to give you some interesting responses and help you out. If you don't know what you don't know, then you'll just go through an endless loop of saying, teach me SQL. That can encompass a lot. It's like asking somebody, teach me software development. It's like asking somebody, teach me to be a doctor. And they're like, well, what kind of doctor? What specialization? What's your time frame? How much foundational knowledge do you already have? Without knowing these things about you, it's really hard to give an accurate response. It's like when somebody says, I want to pass my next technical interview. What does that mean to you? Is your next technical interview going to be at Google, or is it going to be the place down the street that's going to ask you, how your day went and see if you're just a good fit based on like a vibe check? You know what I mean? So these are the problems I think nowadays with people overusing ChatGPT or thinking, oh, why go to a boot camp or why go to college or why do anything when I could just ask ChatGPT? If it was that simple, my friend, then guess what? We'd all just pay the $20 a month and use ChatGPT to do everything for us. As a side note, I use ChatGPT every single day, consistently at work, a ton. I also write a ton of code. ChatGPT is really good at teaching you the basics or answering basic things or even helping me construct some pretty basic code or even not so basic code and doing styling. What it's not so good at is getting the context of the problems that I'm trying to solve. It's also not very good at telling you what's the most latest cutting edge technology or how to use it. If you're using a library or doing something very specific, it's going to be very difficult for ChatGPT to get you out of a hole. So again, this is not a substitute for learning. I hope that I provided you with some decent prompts in a way to actually start getting your hands dirty with SQL. And as a reminder, just go to the show notes where I've put down all these prompts and a link to NeonDB, who I'm not sponsored by, just FYI. This is just a tool I started using at work. I think it's really cool. It's free and you can do some really cool stuff with it. So I hope that's helpful. And if you do want to become a software developer and not some chat GPT prompt engineer or whatever they're trying to frame that as now, then join Parsity.io. And if you're interested in becoming a data engineer, sign up for the link at the bottom of this episode because we are unleashing a Python data engineering 30-day course, which is going to go into the basics of SQL, Python, and data engineering. I cannot wait. It's going to be so cool. And you're going to really get your hands dirty and actually walk away with some valuable skills. Hope to see you there. See you around. That'll do it for today's episode of the Develop Yourself podcast. If you're serious about switching careers and becoming a software developer and building complex software and want to work directly with me and my team, go to Parsity.io. And if you want more information, feel free to schedule a chat by just clicking the link in the show notes. See you next week.